Agrileadership for Tomorrow's World, The Future is Not What You Think It Is. A somewhat open-ended title, but I was advised not to let your title paint you into a corner. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Well, you know how this works. I show you where I've been, some selfies of all the interesting people I've met, give you some take-home messages, and then I'll thank a bunch of people. You wouldn't know it just looking at me, but I don't always follow the pattern. I would, however, like to start with a few thank yous. To my cohort for the crack, but also for the deep conversations. To my mentor, Diana, for your counsel and friendship, thank you. To my sponsor, the NFU East Sussex, for your generous support, thank you very much. But also to these few companies for some additional support. To the AHDB for allowing me the time. But of course, most of all, to Nuffield for this never again opportunity. And for smashing open doors, thank you. Who here has read The Alchemist? Hands up. A few. If you haven't, Brazilian writer Paulo Coelho's masterpiece tells a mythical story of Santiago, an Andalusian shepherd's boy, yearning to travel and search the world for worldly riches. The story takes us, and Santiago actually finds treasure far different and much more valuable than he thought he would. This story teaches us the value of listening to our hearts, following our dreams, but also recognizing the treasure right in front of us, or sometimes inside of us. Now, the first leadership quality I want to talk to you about is authenticity. When I first found out about Terra Viva, I thought this was going to be my eureka moment. This was going to be the management system I had set out on my Nuffield to find. This Dutch family farming flower company had a clear vision: plant a better life. The business was driven by these four principles, visible everywhere: economic, environmental, and social, but also human. They'd basically taken the principles of lean management and put a big, passionate Brazilian heart at the center of it. People-centered lean management. As Klaas this year was explaining here, that a system of normal reviews, but also peer-to-peer reviews and 360 reviews right up to CEO level. 1,300 staff, but every team had a system of daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly meetings with clear KPIs and clear targets. A really, really good business with a really good system and a really good guy in class leading it. Yet, despite this system and this business, staff feedback and staff turnover weren't quite where you thought it would be. After spending a bit of time with Klaas, he shared that he had left the business, but was asked by the family to come back as CEO. And despite such a great business and a great guy, Klaas didn't feel like this was authentic to him. And I think why it maybe weren't flying as well as it could. Here we've got Bernard, a German heir in Brazil. The moment we arrived on farm, we were marched off for miles, walking into the night, through subtropical rainforests where jaguars still roam. What I've saved you here is the fact that he's sitting there in his Speedos while we talk about leadership. In the shrine built by his grandfather with some interesting artifacts in there. Now, despite, let's call it a little bit quirky, and without a clear, apparent management structure, the people on this farm had been there for years, sometimes decades, and they felt like that, a team, working together. So my first message, If you want people to follow your leadership, you can get away with being eccentric, but you won't get away without being authentic. The second thing I want to talk to you about is people will remember how you made them feel. When I first heard Nick speak at the Farmers Club, I was blown away. So I started badgering him for a one-to-one interview. At first, Nick, or to give him his full name, Nick Charles Turret Wheeler, was reluctant. The guy's got a £300 million company to run. But yeah, I wore him down. And I was given from 5 to 5:30, Tuesday the 16th of December, in London at his house in Notting Hill. I arrived at 5 to 5, was shown in by Gareth, the Gen Z Jeeves. I was given a coffee and strict instructions to be gone by 5:30. Nick and his wife was going out to the opera for their anniversary. Now, if you don't know, his wife is Chrissy Rucker, CEO of the White Company. Quite the anniversary to interrupt, and quite the couple. Nick's leadership is perfectly illustrated by this. Charles Turret, as you would expect, has got an online feedback system, mostly complaints. Yet, every Sunday, he'll be on there looking for positive feedback with somebody's name. When he finds it, he'll go to that store that week, introduce himself to the manager and ask for that employee, and thank them there in front of everybody. The result, you can see the revenue for that shop going up, and nobody leaves for ages. If you make people feel good, it'll be good for business. And yes, I felt a bit of that. Even though only given half an hour, I was sat in front of him for 43 minutes. And despite phones ringing and emails pinging, and the last 12 minutes, Gareth and Chrissy staring me out of the door, I was the center of his world. Such a short interview, but I remember how it made me feel. I was very impressed. And as you can see on his face, so was he with the latest in men's fashion. People remember how you make them feel. Make them feel good is good for business. Now, my final thing I want to talk about comes from where my journey first started. But like Santiago, I had to go through this journey of life and Nuffield to fully recognize what's been in front of me all of my life. In December, I was going back to South Africa for the first time in 4 years. Easy to remember 4 years. I was there last time we won the Rugby World Cup. Sorry. But really, why I was excited to go back is the Van Heerden family, the kids, have had a family feud for the last 20 years since my dad's death. But we finally started making amends, started talking again, and I was going back to get some closure on this. Now, my mum was very excited about this, not just to see her favorite child, but for this peace then with her children. So I went to go and see my brother and one sister who I haven't seen or spoken to for 17 years. And it was a bit awkward, but we had a beer and we had a braai, and it felt good. Then on the morning of the 23rd of December, a couple of days before Christmas, I was back in the car to drive the last 700 or so kilometers back to my mum and other sister to go and spend Christmas, when I got a phone call from that sister to say my mum had died that morning, the day I was supposed to arrive. Now, in hindsight, she had found peace in our peace. But as I was driving those final hours, that's not how I saw it. Yes, there was sadness, sorrow, grief, disbelief, but mostly I was angry. I was raging. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't my plan. This was supposed to be a happy holiday. But as I was driving some of those final hours through towns and townships, I started to see something. And for the next 7 days, trying to organize a funeral over Christmas in the summer holidays, in a country where nothing actually ever happened fast. And I was driving through these townships, I started to see something that I recognize, something I knew but hadn't quite fully comprehended. Because here were people living in hardship, real hardship, poverty, crime, violence, gender violence, domestic violence. And yet, despite all of this, they had smiles on their faces. Kids were playing soccer in the street with the joy in their eyes. And I realized what I'm recognizing is something called Ubuntu. Now, there's no English word or direct translation for Ubuntu, but roughly it means humanity to all. It means I can't get and achieve my full potential without those around me achieving theirs. It means I am who I am only because of who we all are. Like I said, I grew up with Ubuntu amongst the isiXhosa people. In fact, I was born only a few miles from the most famous sun. Only a few miles, but a generation and worlds apart in terms of privilege and opportunity. I'm talking, of course, of Rolihlahla, or as we know him, Nelson Mandela. Because he was a man who had to fight all of his life for what was right. Locked up for 28 years, 17 of those in the very hostile Robben Island in the Cape of Storms. A 6-foot man in a 6-foot by 6-foot cell. Yet, despite all of this, Mandela never stopped talking about peace, about reconciliation, about stronger together, about forgiveness. Because you see, Madiba had Ubuntu in his eyes. And yes, if the Van Heerden children had learned a bit more Ubuntu as we were growing up, we might have stayed a farming family if we had a bit of humanity and humility. So those are my 3 take-home messages. If you want to lead where people follow, lead with you. Lead with authenticity. Never forget that people will remember how you made them feel. Make them feel good. It'll be good for your business. But above all, I ask you this. Go back to your farms, to your families. Go back to your companies and your communities. And remember what the shepherd's boy from Mzansi, South Africa, had shared about Ubuntu. Let your people, your staff, your bosses, friends and family, let your kids and your colleagues, let your partners see the Ubuntu in your eyes. Humanity to all. Because you know you won't reach your potential or find fulfillment without those around you reaching theirs. Ubuntu, I am only because we are. Thank you for your time.